So you have a favorite author, and you yourself also enjoy writing. What better way to complement them than to do fan fiction, where you're writing stories similar to their stories, maybe even using their exact same characters, Star Wars, or maybe it's Harry Potter, or one of these other series, and you're doing that, and you're thinking, what could possibly go wrong with this particular strategy? Well, there are a lot of things you're going to want to consider when you're doing fan fiction. This is Chris Baird from selfpublishingmadeeasynow.com, where self-publishing doesn't have to be so hard. So in today's video, we are going to talk all about, can you self-publish fan fiction? And we want to straighten this thing out once and for all. Well, maybe not. That may be a little bit too much, but let's start with a little bit of understanding fan fiction. So the first thing to remember is fan fiction, it's a creative writing form where fans of particular works, and this could be TV shows, movies, other books, you decide, I'm going to create content. In this case, we'd be looking at writing books, writing short stories inside of the same universe, using their characters and stuff, and looking at the different aspects of the world that they're in order to create your own books and stories on that. And this can be a really powerful way to connect with the original stories and other people who are fans, because the authors themselves can only write so much content. So what better way to contribute to the universe of books and stories when the author maybe perhaps isn't writing? For example, so many Game of Thrones books is a perfect example. Like George R. R. Martin gets hung up, and then you start writing these fan fiction books. So it can be a really exciting process, but there are a lot of problems associated with this. The other thing is it allows these authors or the fans to explore alternative storylines, to take the characters and push them and make them more round. The universe can grow drastically much larger by doing this. And the other thing is it can vary a lot based on quality, genres, and themes. There's a lot of things you have to keep in mind when you're writing fan fiction or considering fan fiction, just to get a better understanding. So the concept of self-publishing is another important one. The thing with self-publishing is, well, it depends upon what we're talking about. Are we actually taking our fan fiction and publishing it for money onto a platform like Amazon? Or are we putting it for free on another platform where people can just consume it? Or maybe we're just putting it on our local blog or whatever it might be, a local place where people can just download and read it for fun. And this makes a bit of a difference when it comes to your fan fiction. Now, both are self-published. The second we put it on the market where people are able to download the EPUB version of this or something, well, it's a self-published book, but maybe it's free, so you're not making any money, which doesn't raise any red flags for the owners of that copyright. So, can you self-publish fan fiction? The answer is it's really complicated if you're going to do it making money. And that's where it gets very tricky, because there are a lot of copyright concerns around it. Plus, you can trick people into thinking that, oh, my favorite author's written another book, especially when your cover looks the same and your characters have the exact same names. And maybe you as an author have decided to choose a similar author's pen name close to the name of the actual author of the series without permission. And that's the key issue. You do not have permission. And if you think it's easy to get permission to do something like this, you are completely mistaken. It is incredibly difficult to get permission for publishing fan fiction. Now, while doing it without the author's authorization, that can risk a number of things on Amazon. First of all, they can just do a takedown request. The other thing is they could theoretically sue you. Now, this normally does not happen. The other thing is Amazon could close your account if they find that you're violating too many principles, and they can even take money away from you if you've done that. And I have seen this done in some areas, particularly in the areas of video games, where you're writing fictional stories based upon the video games. And maybe they let it go through for a period of time, but then they decide to tell you, hey, we own the copyright. You need to take this down immediately. So then people attempt to say the unofficial guide to this video game or unofficial stories. But still, you're using their material. You have not gotten permission to go about doing that. And this can also have some risks associated with if you're thinking of putting your book for sale to make money off of it on a site like Amazon. The other thing, though, is of course you can publish it for free on platforms like Archives of Our Own, because it provides a space for fan fiction writers to share and receive feedback on their works within a community of fellow fans. And again, we're not charging anybody for this. You're not really making any money off of it, which then makes it a little bit easier and less likely you're going to have a problem with the owner of the copyright. Speaking of that, the copyright laws and fan fiction. So the first thing is they govern and they protect the creative works, including the original stories, the characters, and settings. And the thing is the fan fiction often involves using copyrighted elements, because what's the point of fan fiction if it isn't in the same universe with the same character names and all of these different aspects of it? And there are a lot of legal issues here that you would need to talk with a lawyer about, and I'm not a lawyer on this particular issue, but there can be jurisdiction, like what rights do they have to restrict your ability to write fan fiction. Some of these things would have to be figured out in a court of law, which can make it very tricky. Usually for the fan, you're not in a position to go after one of these major authors and say, no, I have a right to do this, and you're going to go through the court proceedings with these huge publishing houses where they're going to be defending their right and their copyright, and you're really just a small little fish in this huge ocean. And so usually what happens is you get squashed and your book is needed to be taken off the market completely. The other thing is many of the copyright holders do tolerate and are permissive stances towards fan fiction, but not all of them, and you need to make sure that you are properly respecting the copyright. You can look and see if the thing you're considering writing fan fiction, it's really depressing if you read a lot of it and it's taken down, to see if that author is okay with fan fiction. So case studies. Let me hit a case study while we're here. So one of them would be Anne Rice's book, The Vampire Chronicles, which a particularly interview with a vampire. And what was interesting was she was most definitely interested. The elements of her book she did not want anyone using her characters or any of this stuff from, specifically her most famous book. And she even went to fan fiction and requested at fanfiction.net remove stories that were featuring her characters. Okay, now she did come up with later books and she was a little more open to it, and one of the reasons she gave then, who knows what the actual reasons are, but one of the reasons was she didn't want it to interfere with her storylines and stuff by reading this fan fiction. And so one of the common trends you'll see is that these authors of these books, that they're not so much worried about losing money, because in reality your fan fiction just drives more traffic to their books, but they were more so worried about them reading the fan fiction and it corrupting their storylines, plots, and other things like that, which also can do it if you're a fan of these books, because you're seeing books that are not in the official canon for that specific book series, the universe that it is, like the Marvel universe. You could write stories, but then the stories could clash or have issues, and they're not part of the official canon for that universe. So when you're writing fan fiction or reading fan fiction, it can corrupt it, and the authors are even worried about that happening. Now, platforms for publishing fan fiction. Now I'm going to hit 3 of them. One of them is Archive of Our Own. So I already mentioned that one, AO3. It's a popular platform dedicated to fan fiction publishing, so that's a great way to go. The other is fanfiction.net, which was the one I mentioned when I was dealing with the interview with the vampire. And it's one of the largest platforms for fan fiction publishing. It hosts a vast collection of fan works across various genres and fandoms. Users can post their stories, receive feedback, interact with other fans, and the platform has a user-friendly interface and supports multiple categories and filters. Now, you'll notice one thing that's not there is making money off of your fan fiction. So I would be careful if you're going to take that fan fiction and publish it on Amazon or Lulu, Ingram, Spark, Drafted Digital, etc. Okay, and the final one is WhatsApp. So you can definitely do it. Now, it's not exclusively fan fiction. WhatsApp has a significant fan fiction community and allows writers to publish their stories, gain readership, and receive feedback from a large and diverse user base. So it has various features like multimedia integrations, contests, and social interaction options for authors and readers, and it's a good place to get feedback on your writing. I personally recommend, when you're not doing fan fiction, doing normal writing, make sure you just publish on Amazon. We should start making money and learning marketing right from the start. Even if you got 1 million views on Wattpad, don't assume for a second that when you put that onto Amazon, that's going to sell millions of copies. It just doesn't work that way. It's a different skill set. And so you can learn writing, but why not just start from the beginning and start making money, building an email list, and making sales on those books, as opposed to just having a lot of people download and read your book. You have to decide what exactly your goal is when you're getting started with this whole self-publishing thing. But definitely Wattpad is a good place to go for your fan fiction when you're going to do it, even though it's not dedicated. Now, tips for self-publishing fan fiction. Now, there's a couple of these ones. The first thing is understand the copyright and legal implications. You need to familiarize yourself with the copyright laws and specific guidelines of the fandom you're writing for. So in other words, maybe they've already had problems and they've said you've crossed the boundaries of fair use and transformative work to avoid the potential copyright infringement issues you may face. And particularly, easy way to see this is what has happened to other fans. Don't be the first fan to do the fan fiction on your book here. It might be good to wait to see if you have some other people who've done it first and if they're getting in trouble with anyone. The other is modify and adapt your fiction. You can consider making changes to the characters, the settings, the names. You can even change the plot elements, all of these sorts of things in the universe. But the problem is, at some point, it's no longer fan fiction. It's just a copy story that's very familiar, for example, to Harry Potter, but you have different names on everyone, and Hogwarts has a different name, and all of these sorts of things that have been changed. But then is it really fan fiction at this point, or just a ripoff of their universe, and then you're writing your own story? Do you see? So in one sense, that would not work so well. The next is research self-publishing platforms. Look at the different ones that we were looking at here and make sure you're not choosing one where you're going to be selling it for money, because that's usually going to create issues for you when you're doing the whole fan fiction thing. So you're going to want to make sure that you're not selling these fan fiction. That will definitely get you in trouble. So in conclusion, you can see that the whole fan fiction thing can be very confusing. It's definitely worth doing because it's one of the ways of really showing devotion. You read that book and you really are devoted to this specific story or whatever they're doing there, and you want to show your devotion, and other people can really enjoy what you've written because the authors can only write so much, and there are so many subplots that have been left untouched. And this is an outstanding way for you to get better at your writing skills, which you also should, of course, self-publish on Amazon. But putting this fan fiction out there, it also helps you become a better writer, and it's a lot of fun, and people really enjoy reading the stories. Just make sure you check the legal ramifications, the copyright infringements, and what have the authors and the publishing houses done previously to people who've written fan fiction in the same area. But if you're wondering about this whole self-publishing thing and getting started, go ahead and check out below in the description and grab a copy of my absolutely free self-publishing checklist to make sure that you're not skipping any of the steps necessary to get your book self-published and selling. Thanks.